Good morning, Stephen. I say good morning again. You're in Britain, in the UK, so it's more the afternoon. How are you this afternoon?
Yeah, I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing great, and the book is in back of you, perched very nicely. Mine back of me here, maybe not so perched
Yeah,
as nicely. What a freaking
yeah,
saga! What a
yeah.
book! Congratulations! It's
yeah.
people who'll be listening to this. It'll be probably the 18th of April, which is your publication date in the U.S. Um, how you feeling as in the run up to the publication, and maybe tell us about some events or tours or anything you got going on too.
Yes, I'm feeling great about it. Just a wonderful time. I've been working on this book for so long now, and it's just yes, a bit surreal to finally have things come together, everything come together. The reviews and very nice comments, and yeah, and it's just wonderful. So the number of events I have, like, I've given a number of podcast interviews. And there are also other interviews coming up. I think I have like an interview with some radio channels anyway. I don't want to mention them now anyway. So and some publicity events around the UK, and I was hoping to visit the US anyway.
All right.
But I was trying to renew my passport and came in very late. And the closest visa appointment date I could get, was August, right? That's a little bit far, but we'll see, and
Okay.
yeah.
Oh man. Well, I think one of the things people often say about U.S. writers or excuse me, U.S. readers and just U.S. literary culture is that we don't know as much about the rest of the world as the rest of the world knows about us, right? Kind of an ignorance of that. But tell us about some of the blurbs from some great UK writers that you've gotten.
Yeah, I've got some blobs here.
Ian Rankin, I
I've
believe,
got
is one, right?
yeah. In ranking said, quotes, this novel exudes a wonderfully vivid sense of place and leads the reader inside the head of its teenage hero. It's a narrative of depth that also manages to be instantly engaging. And there's this very wonderful one by Max Potter. He says, quote, it's eccentric, profound, timely, specific, but it also has global consensus and a really, really brilliant central character. Yeah, that's wonderful.
Oh man, those are some great words. Yeah, I love that. I love the idea that it is eccentric. I hear that and I mean that in the best possible sense. There's a scene in the book. I mean, we'll talk more about the book specifically, but with Eileen and with Andy, and I believe it's Eileen who says she's reading his poem, and she says it's
Yeah.
amazing. No, I'm sorry. He's talking kind of about her how much he enjoys it, and he writes that it's amazing how a work of art can live beyond its creator,
Mm.
outside of the creator, etc. So yeah, I do wonder about like, how much do you feel like the book is timely, like 2023, but also how it's maybe even going backwards, like is it how much it really talks about, 1980s Nigeria, 2000 Nigeria, you know what I mean, and even the future. Like I wonder about how much of
Yeah.
a sense of place you feel like this book has, because you talked about you've written it for a long time or been working on it for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. In terms of place, Nigeria is this, my country, Nigeria, and where this novel is set. So it's this post-colonial country. I mean, so many things are happening, and when you observe the history of the country, you begin to see. There's so many constants, right? So many things that they haven't changed. They are still the same, and they will keep remaining. They'll remain the same even in the next 50, 100, 200 years or something. Yeah, they will still just be there. Yeah, and still, of course, and it's also a place of so much turmoil. It's a country that's they're actually countries, and just it's form of like three, four, five countries or so, perhaps all those melded together, forced.
Mm.
And, still come turmoil. We're still trying to understand who we are. Are we Nigerians? We've been given in Nigeria by a British woman, right? So what is this Nigeria all about, and who we are as Nigerians? And that is a constant question, I think, for even the next 100 years, 200 years. I think Nigerians will still be asking about, and that's what this novel examines. And the whole concept of post-colonialism, and what happens after, I mean, make people have been subjugated and exploited and everything, and their sense of self shattered and all that. Yeah, that's what the book is, and it will still keep remaining like that. And to talk about a few other things, like some of the themes in the novel, I think themes that have to do with, I mentioned post-colonialism, but also colonialism too. Um, and themes of like collapsed governments, corruption, uh, that search for identity and search for self, which I discussed just a moment ago. So like for example, in terms of like corruption and the collapse of the government, for example, these are like themes that have been part of Nigeria since since independence, since 1960, and I mean my parents, I mean, were dealing with these issues when they were little, very, very little, and and my older siblings have been dealing with these issues and now I'm dealing with these issues and my children and our grandchildren, if yeah, we keep dealing with these issues and the problem with Nigeria, like things are actually like, I mean, in terms of things are getting worse exponentially. Like I remember when I was little, sorry, I'm going to end in a moment, but when I was little, for example, uh, we used to have electricity for a while, like in Nigeria, for maybe like a day, you could have electricity for a whole day, and then let's say there would not be electricity for a while, and then you say, and they will complain and complain, And then when I was like a teenager, and then we didn't have, like, we used to only have electricity for like, let's say, a quarter of a day, 6 hours or something like that. And they will cry, things are getting worse, things are getting worse. I mean, the last time I was in Nigeria, I mean, we only get electricity for sometimes 1 hour a day or for long stretches of, I mean, without no electricity. And like this again, and the population is growing and growing at an exponential rate. And so, I mean, if you want to follow that trajectory, like you almost become so cynical, so pessimistic about the country. And yeah.
That sense of cynicism and pessimism definitely comes through. Yeah, so I mean, you were talking about the sense of it, the way that your older siblings and your parents experience the same way. So I guess just going back to your own childhood, then specifically with regards to reading in the written word, there are so many languages spoken in Nigeria. Even Andy is, I don't know, trilingual, bilingual. He knows a little bit in some languages, Hausa, etc. Right, but he's able to get by. There's even a sense, like, it seems to me like even those who are Christian, they'll use the term Allah, right, which a lot of people associate with Islam. So there's just like a way of knowing the world and navigating the world through language. What were you reading as a kid? Were you reading stuff from the British from the British days? Were you reading Nigerian writers? I again, with the idea of Americans sometimes being ignorant, I think a lot of us think of Chinua Achebe, which is not ignorant in itself, but as in, like, we don't necessarily, our list maybe is not that long of Nigerian writers that we know. We know Adichie, right? But Achebe obviously was world changing with his work, with Things Fall Apart, etc. So it's just a long way of getting at what were you reading? Did you feel that you were reading, like Adichie talks about, reading about like kids in England with snow, and she's like, I've never seen snow in my life. Did you feel like you're reading work that was about you, or that was just kind of that was given to you maybe because of the colonial system?
Yes, it's a very important question because like some Nigerian writers, for example, like you mentioned, like many of our writers are successful writers who are not intentionally. I mean, often have these middle class backgrounds and all that, and so they have books around the houses and all that, and their parents are very educated, and all. But I mean, that was not my case anyway. Like, my parents only had like basic education, like, so there were no like books around. I mean, we only had like the Bible and some religious texts, religious commentary texts, like in the house, and so I mean, for a good chunk of my life, I didn't actually read, right? Yeah, I mean, I didn't actually read fiction. I didn't even know what the heck fiction was anyway. Yeah, but I knew, of course, what films would watch Nollywood films, Hollywood films sometimes at home when I was little. Anyway, but it was until I like got a scholarship and also a missionary school, a school funded by Irish missionaries
Mm.
in my town in Kotangora. Then that was when I first saw like a library. Wow, so that there could be a room with books in this room. I mean, everything is,
Mm.
and I could just go there. You could sit down, you could read the book, you could, yeah, I know that. If yeah, and I don't want to digress so much because the very first school I actually began attending, I mean, it was a very, 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 very poor school. And um, I mean, I learned how to read very late in my life. I think around like 6 or 7 or something, and or was even 8 years old or something, like a bit too late anyway. So before I got the scholarship to the missionary school, anyway, and so the very moment I entered my school library, I mean, just yeah, I mean, I've not come out in a sense. I've still not come out. I've still been there in a way, like mentally, I'm just still there, and my life has just been there because the very first I picked up to read, it was just this magnificent experience. It like it just made my brain to become awakened, and many aspects of myself that were dormant all just came back alive, you know. And so many of the books that were in the library, because the library, as I said, was the school was funded by Irish missionaries, and
Mm.
the library was actually full of books from Ireland, and of course Irish literature, British literature, and all that, and and most of these books were donations by Irish children, Irish families, and all that. And yeah, you'd see when you open some of the books, you see the names on the books and all. Yeah, the names of the children and all that. Yeah,
Mm.
that's very nice. And it's a nice way to learn many Irish names. Anyway, um, yeah. So I mean, then my school library. So I mean, of course, I read all this children stuff, children literature, for example, like I mean, The Little Mermaid, like is it The Adventures of Pinocchio? I'm not sure if
Mm.
I'm saying that title correctly. But some of the books that stay with me, that usually stay with me, were books like the first is The Swiss Family Robinson by
Yeah.
Johann David Weiss. So a children's edition of the book. I mean, when I read the book then, I didn't even know. I thought that was the book. That was actually the book, but I didn't know it was actually an abridged version of
Uh-huh.
yeah. So I thought that was the beginning and the end, whatever. And of course, read Tom Sawyer, The Adventures of Tom Sawyer by
Okay.
Mark Twain. Um, many books by many other Nigerian writers, like uh, The Bottle Leopard by uh, I don't know why I'm finding it difficult to remember his name now. Whatever, I'll come back to that. So many, yeah, but most of the books there were by Irish authors. Most of the like Dahl, yeah, and yeah, and these books were really wonderful. But again, in a sense, like they about things that I didn't know, or in a way they were like forcing like a reality that didn't exist for me at the time into my own I mean, more reality at that time.
Mhm.
For example, I mean, I was reading books about sandwiches. Everybody seemed to be eating sandwiches, and I thought sandwiches had sand. That sandwiches are made of
Uh-huh.
sand and
Uh-huh.
something like sandwich. Or I was were they made by cheese or something?
Uh,
And I mean, you hear of I mean, everyone is wearing a jacket. Someone like, what are you wearing jackets? Like,
uh,
why? Yeah, all this kind of stuff and all. Yeah.
uh-huh. Ah, very interesting. Did you ever
So I read all these.
go ahead?
Yeah, yeah. Go on.
I was just saying, did you ever read any
No,
Joyce?
so I read all these books at the. Yeah, I mean that was much later. So I mean, I saw as now as a little child, so I read all these books. But as I grew older, and like I ended up reading like most of the books in the school library, and there was almost nothing to read. So I began to read the encyclopedias. So
Hmm.
and I will read about American history, British history, electronics.
Hmm.
I mean things about science and all that, and just anything. And I will borrow the encyclopedias. I'll take them home and I'll read own artistry, all the great art pieces and all that. And it was really wonderful. But as I grew up so I read other books too. Books that I like some of my friends who had siblings who were studying like literature and all that. So I would borrow their books and I end up not returning them because they wouldn't even ask me for the books. And so
Hmm.
I had like many books, yeah, at home, which were not clear mine anyway. So I read of course, one of the books that one of the most important books I read at that time was Black Boy by Richard Wright. It was
Okay.
just this amazing, amazing book because wow, I mean, on the one hand, because at that time anyway, I already know that, or I already decided to become a writer, or I had already fallen in love with the written word anyway, and so and so I'm reading about this book with the main character and wanted to be a writer. So and then of course about this place called America. I mean, growing up, of course, we always hear about America. We always wish to go to America since when we were little. Since we began to speak, I know we've been
Hmm.
speaking up talking about America. That's another topic
Hmm.
I'm going to go to at some point. Anyway, yeah. So Black Boy by Richard Wright, and then I mean and then like the book just awakened me to in a different sense in a way that's like it made me realize oh that I was black, right, like oh like I am actually black, I know, right, and that's and it hugely depressed me because it seemed to like foreshadow in a way the kind of world I would navigate as an adult. I mean a world of injustice, I mean a racialized world, a lot of bias and all that. And it was just so depressing in many ways and also uplifting too and empowering. And of course, most of the time in my life as a teenager too, I read, I mean, yeah, so I didn't have anything to read in my school library. So luckily for me, I had the internet. That was when I mean we had mobile phones and everything.
Hmm.
And then I would um and then I mean that's such like the project is it Gutenberg or I don't know whether that's the correct pronunciation or whatever. So Project Gutenberg they have like ebooks of the classics there
Okay.
and then yeah and that was when I first of course read Franz Kafka, The Metamorphoses. I mean one
Mm.
of the texts he referenced here. So already on my phone I had a Motorola flip phone then that and a very tiny screen, you know, and I was just yeah scroll and read these books and yeah even James Joyce. Um, I got some of these classic writers that I couldn't find around me, and yeah, so I read them online on my phone, and
Hmm.
yeah, let me note. Let me
Wow.
put a pause here. Yeah,
So thank you for that. So Richard Wright, of course, which is definitely very well known in the States. You talk about Joyce, you talk about the Metamorphosis. So, I'm seeing some connections between Andy and yourself. You talk about the missionary school run by the Irish priests, um,
yeah,
you can say, oh, no, not even, I'm nowhere related to Andy. That's not him at all. Totally fictional. But no, but you're talking about going to that school, and of course in the book the metamorphosis is a big part. It's a big part of conversations with Eileen and Andy, and I wonder, and you talk about translation, it would be, I guess, what originally in the German into maybe into English back into whatever other languages. That famous first line from the Metamorphosis. I wonder what
yeah,
when you read it. I wonder what you're seeing. Are you seeing like a beetle? Are you seeing like what kind of insect are you seeing? Are you seeing like a gross scrubby type of thing, or I just wonder because that first line is so famous.
yeah. That first line, I mean, a very famous line, and deservedly so, and it's a wonderful line. I mean, it's a line that lends itself to so many interpretations. I mean,
Yep.
as a young black Nigerian boy, I mean, when I read it then, as a Nigerian man, too, I am now, and now reflecting on the book and what it means for us.
Hmm.
Waking up suddenly one day and discovering that you're black or you're African or you are whatever, whatever the West designates you as, anyway, designates you to be, you know. And when I read the book there, I mean, I can't remember exactly how old I was then. So I think the translation, the version I read was the one I had vermin.
Okay.
So I think I had to look up what vermin was,
Sure.
what vermin was, and so I mean, it was like I mean, like Nigeria too is this place where I mean, you are all like here in the West where things are a bit too pristine, whatever. But I mean, this tropical place, and we have different kinds of insects.
Hmm.
I mean, from beetles, termites, ants, like different insects around you all the time. I mean, mosquitoes and all that. So it was just so, yeah, so vivid for me. Like, could just see, could just see, yeah, Gregor Samsa becoming any of those creatures, you know.
Yeah. I've done a couple. I did an episode for the podcast just about that book. I read it when I was about 21, 22, and I was so excited, so hyped for it. I thought it was a little bit too on the nose. but I've reread it recently, and I'm like, I've definitely have a different view, and I've read, some case studies of it, or analyses, and I've come around. I'm obviously a class, like even when I wasn't necessarily loving it, I could recognize greatness. Maybe it wasn't my cup of tea or whatever. But all right, well, I appreciate that. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's so interesting to. I just think of like all the different translations it's gone through to get to us.
yeah, yeah,
Whoever the readers are. So, well,
yeah.
so I'd love to talk about what really, you talk about what you're reading. What really made you say like I can do this? I can write like Kafka. I can maybe not write exactly like him.
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
got a distinctive style or whatever, as do you. But just like what made you want to be a writer, and what were some of the eureka moments where you said like I can do this? People, well, let me ask you. I mean, did you have a blog like Andy? Did you do poems? Like, did you win a prize?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, yeah. I mean, I had a blog once anyway. I mean, I was just then when
Didn't we
you
all?
have,
Didn't we all? Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, just a blog, and they just make a post, and then of course, and that is the end of your blogging experience, right? Yeah, yeah. So I was a teenager around 50 when I was like around this age. I started writing poetry. I mean, I fell in love with poetry, and I wrote so many poems, and so we published like on Nigerian papers, magazines, and all that. And of course, having access to the internet, and then like I just sent my poems out, and so I published like a number of US like literary magazines. Many of them are actually like defunct now. I mean, anymore, and it's really sad. Yeah. Well, I mean, I was incredibly proud of that anyway. Sorry, I'm digressing again. I mean,
That's right.
your question was about
Just kind of like what were some of the catalysts for you really getting into
yeah,
writing and
yeah,
sticking with it?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I love to digress, right, about conversations anyway. So, so yeah, so I think this was 2005, right? 2005. That was some months after my father had died, and yeah, I think I was around 11 or so then. And it was just this afternoon, like this afternoon, yeah, I'd finished completing my homework and all that, right? And it was very hot, and I was just sitting outside on the mat outside my house in Nigeria. There, yeah, very very hot. I'm talking about like 40 something degrees,
Ooh,
yeah, Celsius. Yeah,
great.
so
Thank you.
so yeah, and yeah, so I was sitting outside my house, and then yeah, and that was after like a year or so after I began reading books, literary books, novels, storybooks, from my school library. Anyway, so I was sitting down outside the house, and then I just found myself with my parents just writing a story. Like I just it was really fun. It was really weird, and also, but it was as if I was doing something. I don't know, something spiritual and again something illegal at the same time. Yeah,
Hmm.
whatever. So I was just writing. I was writing a story, and I was writing and writing and writing, and then it was really fun, and it felt very empowering. And for example, while writing, I could create things and they would exist. I mean, for example, the story I was writing about was about a war in the animal kingdom, how the fish were ostracized and how they had to, they were forced away from the land, how they had to live in water, adapt, struggle to adapt, and all that. And yeah, and then like so while writing the story, I could just do things whatever I wanted to do. I could create trees with eyes, with hair. I could,
Hmm.
I mean, create, I mean, rivers that spoke, that sang, and all that. So I could do all these wonderful things. Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, for an 11-year-old boy. Anyway. So and it was just, as I said, very empowering. Anyway, and I showed the story to a schoolmate of mine at the time, and after reading it, he just couldn't believe I was the one who wrote it. Yeah, he thought
Hmm.
perhaps I had copied the story from a storybook somewhere, and yeah, and I was passing it out as mine anyway. And I think that was really amazing. That made me think, oh, that maybe I could actually write, maybe I could actually
Hmm.
do this, and maybe it's something, yeah, maybe it's actually like a gift or something, whatever. And it was, as I said, very empowering, and it was just so fun to do. Just like I just couldn't not write, right? I just had to just write, and I was just writing and writing and writing, and I experimented with different forms, different genres. I mean, like plays. I read a lot of plays when I was young, and as I said later on, poetry and all that. And I think for a young writer, it's just very very important to try your hand and Yeah, not to master, maybe not master, but to, I mean, to be very, very conversant of these different genres of literature. And because I think it's, especially for a fiction writer, for a novelist, because it all come together at some point. And the novel is just this beast, and that you would have to confront a beast with different faces, different
Hmm.
powers, superpowers, and you have to have, like, for me, the way I see craft, different facets, different dimensions of like strength to confront this beast. Anyway,
Mm.
and to add to a question you asked me originally, I think like when I was writing this story as an 11-year-old, I because I had this huge love for words. I just can't even describe it. Like what words can do. I mean, they're just letters, they're just words, I know, but what they can do and the impact of the impact they have, what we consume them in, like the impact in our psyche and in our emotions and all that and whatever. So I just had this huge love for words. And I think, I mean, the love and the fascination for words, for writing, yeah, for the spoken word, written word, I know, came from, um, I think, from my experience of being a Christian, right? Like my parents would take me to church and all that, and in church and in the Catholic Church, then I mean the priest would read from these sacramentary, these big books, holy books,
Mm.
and it's really some wonderful poetry. You wonder, oh, like who composed? I was wondering then, like who composed all this stuff? Like where did they come from? And
Hmm.
who were they? Like what were they thinking about? I mean, I was so fascinated about all these things as a little child, and I think all that spawned spoils the love for writing, for the word, for the written word and all. Yeah, in
Yeah.
me.
Oh, I appreciate that. That what a beautiful story just about like your first story and the fish and just like I know that excitement you're talking about. Just like I created this. This didn't exist before I wrote it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I mean, shoot, the young Stephen with the allegory, huh? About the fish and the kingdom, like, and well, I mean,
Yeah,
well, and I appreciate too the connection, obviously, with Catholicism, with Christianity. I mean, right? There's so much allegory.
yeah.
I mean, depending on the way you look at the Bible, right? But there's so much allegory there. The fable, the
Mm,
the parables is the term I'm looking for, of course. Oh my gosh,
yeah,
so
yeah.
interesting.
And
And
even the
then
Old Testament and all that. And it's so
uh,
wonderful as a child hearing all that. Yeah, yeah. Very good
did,
training for a writer.
right, and you see the difference, right, between some of the priests who are incredible orators and some who maybe not, you know.
Exactly
Right.
that. And it's like some priests, I really love them because I mean they were just preaching, right? I mean, they didn't have like prepared speeches. Maybe they had some lines planned, whatever, and directions, whatever. But I was just so amazed with how creative they were, like white speaking. They could move from different kinds of tones,
Sure.
from humor and then to, very visceral, very like poignant,
Hmm.
topics to very heartbreaking stuff, and like they had this huge range of engaging an audience and of yeah and
Hmm.
of not manipulating of using emotions, whatever, of
Hmm.
dispensing emotions. I found that really wonderful. Yeah, really wonderful.
Definitely. I didn't grow up with I didn't grow up with parents or anybody who really, who told me like, hey, the Bible is literal. But that's what I assumed, right? As a kid, you assume like, yes, there was literally, Adam and Eve, and literally this happened. Literally, people lived to 500 years old. And I just remember like, maybe late junior high, high school, just like, even priests who were like, hey, this is allegorical and telling the history of, why, Mark wrote it at this time and who wrote it with him. And yeah, that was so mind blowing to me, right? Just like that it is allegory, that it's like a lot of it's fable and it's meant to tell a story. And they were, looking for your certain audiences, like you said, all that. So, I wonder then maybe about perspective as you got into writing this book and working on it. Just, I'm not sure exactly when you moved to the UK, but just the idea of like what moving to the UK maybe allowed you to write about Nigeria. Just like, the idea of if it's been 5 years or 10 years or 15 years, you see your home or you see your place differently. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think, luckily for me anyway, I began writing this book in Nigeria in
Okay.
June 2018, and yeah, so I wrote a very quick draft, like within 2.5 weeks. Then, yeah, on my BlackBerry phone, because I love my phone. It was this very personal device. and
Yeah.
that I would just could just focalize on sentences,
Uh,
and all that scenes and all. So I'm BlackBerry phone, and it's really wonderful. Anyway, and I wrote night and day, and yeah. So, but so I wrote a very quick draft in Nigeria, and then when I came to the UK to do an MA, to study for an MA in creative writing at the University of East Anglia.
hmm,
Um, so and so I because when I came to the UK, then I began the second iteration of the novel, and so I mean I already for the first draft I only saved like the first like 2 pages, which these first 2 pages were just so special. That came to me like in a very wonderful moment of inspiration. Anyway, that
hmm,
was in 2018. So I saved these first 2 pages, and then I began the novel from scratch, and then the second iteration of the novel was really helpful and it's really powerful. I mean, it made the story come even more alive because um, I was now like a bit far from home. I was not far from home. I was now there was a sense of distance, huge distance between me and the place I was writing about, and that's actually made this place much more palpable, much more
hmm,
real. I could see it in a much more clear way. The emotions were more intense,
hmm.
and there was this huge clarity whenever this very huge clarity that came from this distance. Yeah, and just aspect of myself, aspect of my family, my friends, my community that I couldn't see. I could just see them so clearly, and so I was just writing with so much fever, with so much, so
Yeah.
much, so much anticipation, so much joy and all that, and yeah, yeah,
So are you saying you wrote the first draft in like 2.5 weeks?
yeah. I wrote it
Dang.
because the as I said like the novel began from one evening like that. I mean, that was no, I mean, I could trace the beginning of the novel to many events that happened
Sure.
before that in my life and all, yeah, and some of the things I had been writing before then. But the novel began one evening in 2018, in June 2018. I was just sitting in my living room, and then this powerful voice just comes to me. I mean, a voice full of urgency,
Hmm.
full of so much guilt, shame, um, and like a desire to confess, desire to be heard, and all. And so I was just more like a secretary. I was just transcribing whatever this voice said to me
Hmm.
and all that. So I wrote this 500 word piece that at the time felt like the most truthful, most powerful,
Hmm.
if it's written like I mean piece of writing I had composed up to that time. Anyway, so after writing that after composing that passage, and that passage, mind you, is actually the opening of the novel.
Ah.
Yeah, it's still the current opening of the novel anyway. And yeah, and so I wrote um so after writing that passage, so I spent like some weeks just trying to like sketch the world, sketch my characters, and write so many vignettes and all that. And so once what I felt I had something to work with and all, and then I started writing morning after night on my BlackBerry phone. I had another phone that I used for I mean for keeping in touch with people. So with that phone, I just turned that phone off for like two for the 2 weeks, right? 2.5 weeks.
Huh.
Whenever I was writing morning after, I just wanted to like prove myself that oh I could do this. I mean I could have like despite how no matter how rough it was, like a draft of a novel. I mean to at least start to reach 45,000 or 50,000 words, like to get that done. Because before that time in my life, I'd always wanted to write a novel, and then I would write like 50 pages, and I would lose interest, or I wouldn't know how to develop the
Hmm.
story, and then I will move on to something else, and I'll write on that 100 pages, 150 pages, and then I wouldn't know how to develop the story, or I would just lose interest. Anyway, and but this was like, oh, like I knew I felt I had something powerful, something that's going to help me to not just understand myself and to come to terms with many issues, many aspects of